It's about faith. Stop the preoccupation. God wants your heart.
Welcome to session 5. You know, it's been 5 sessions together, and I'm praying that some of you are putting first things first, that idea of discipline, delayed gratification, advanced decision making. You know, it's one thing, you get those going, it gets exciting for a few weeks, and then what I have to tell you is it's hard to keep up. And so we want to talk today about how to keep first things first. Not just put them there, but over time, how do you keep first things first? In the next 2 sessions, we're going to learn exactly how to do that.
We're talking about balancing life's demands, and then the issue of priorities come up, right? I mean, priorities are, you know, what do you do first, what's most important, and you have to have priorities because you have limitations. We wouldn't need priorities if you had unlimited time, unlimited resources, unlimited energy. But you only have so much of those things, so you get to choose how to invest them. We've said there's 6 indicators that tell you that you're probably not investing them very well, and therefore God won't get maximum glory from your life, and you won't get the good. And then we said, well, let's define what are biblical priorities. And we talked about them. It's like a fountain where the first priority flowing, your relationship with God, and then your mate, then your family, then your work, and your ministry. So it's a relational, abiding dynamic. And then we said there's 2 tools to get us, you know, moving in the right direction. We got to get a hold of our time and get a hold of our money. Our time will help us get wisdom from God to allocate the energy and what He's given us and the opportunity, and the money will demonstrate where our values are and get our hearts in the right place. And we said, okay, good enough. That's sort of hard to take, but, you know, we're in this together. And so in the second session, we said, all right, I want to get a hold of my time, I want to get a hold of my money. And then we said, but how do you put first things first? And, you know, we're in denial, so a lot of us, it's been a little of a wake-up call. We're afraid to try new things because we failed so many times in the past. And so we said, oh, well, then the real issue is this word that's got a bad reputation called discipline. And discipline is not a dirty word. It's a fruit of the Spirit. It's doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done. It's embracing hard, difficult, painful things, relationship issues on the front end so that you get something better, richer, deeper on the back end. And so that's really what we've talked about. And then we talked about, you know, well, how do you develop discipline? In 2 words, it's delayed gratification. Well, what's the dynamics? How do you get it operational? In 3 words, it's advanced decision-making from 1 Corinthians 9. And then we said, well, how do you make those advanced decisions? And we've learned from the Apostle Paul, clear-cut objectives. And then you have to, you know, focus on the reward instead of what you're giving up. And then you ponder the consequences. And so that's where we've been. Now we want to jump in. And I want to ask and answer the question, putting first things first is one thing. Keeping first things first, now that's a whole nother thing. So we're going to talk about, well, how do you keep first things first? The problem is many start well, but few finish well. It's one thing to make a commitment and to really mean it. It's quite another thing to keep it sustained over a significant period of time so that those things that you know you want to do, you know God wants you to do, you find yourself little by little by little putting a week together into a month, and a few months, into a year, and a few years, into a decade, and a couple decades. And that's how you leave a legacy. I mean, that's how life really plays out. It's what I'm doing today with a view to God's calling, His purpose and legacy in my life. And, you know, whether it's scanning, you know, you can read the characters in this book, and a lot of them start well. I mean, I'm reading through right now just my personal devotional time. Just finished 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings. And I got news for you. There's a lot of kings that start well, but I can only find a handful that finish well. Samson starts well, doesn't finish well. Solomon starts well, doesn't finish well. Demas started well, didn't finish well. In the second half of life, some people that we all have admired something happens. A lot of churches start well, don't finish well. A lot of businesses. I mean, remember the book In Search for Excellence by Tom Peters? There were 10 companies he profiled in that book. This is excellence. I could be mistaken, but at least 9 out of 10 of those currently are out of business. They started well. In a season, they were doing some things well, but it wasn't sustainable. So, that's really, you can kind of look at me like, well, gosh, I'm glad there's the good news for this session. No one else is finishing well, but somehow, right? That's the problem. In fact, closer to home, a lot of marriages start well. A lot of parenting starts well. A lot of it doesn't finish well. And now that we've got the problem isolated, what's the solution? I'm going to suggest that the solution, apart from your own relationship with God, there's no quick, easy, but for people who really want to follow Christ, for people that want to honor God, for people who want to balance their life and do things God's way for His glory and for their good and for others, the 2 words I would give you is biblical accountability. Biblical accountability. Let me give you a definition. Biblical accountability is enlisting the support of those who love me to help me keep my commitments to God. In other words, it's biblical. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. It's not simply accountability. That's, in some ways, a negative word, too. This is not getting a group of people that harass you. This is not getting a group of people that you can meet with on a regular basis to make you feel guilty. This is not calling it, we're involved in an accountability group, but everyone goes about, a little past the first superficial layer, but you never really get down to what's really going on. This is where you invite people into your life and you say, this isn't about expectations of other people. This is where you say, I want to be. In my case, I want to be a man of God. I want to be a great father. I want to be a great husband. I want to be, in the eyes of God, a great pastor and a great friend. Will you help me keep my commitments to God? I don't want to fulfill your program. I don't want to fulfill what you think. I'm asking you, would you enter into my inner world because of our relationship and our trust? Will you help me keep my commitments to God? I'm going to open my life. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to share my victories. I'm going to share my struggles. Will you help me? That's biblical accountability. And I'd like to suggest that there is no way to fulfill anything we've talked about without it. It's powerful. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12 says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But notice that, pity the man, pity the woman who falls. And you're going to fall and has no one to help him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 is not quickly broken. We have an American individualistic mindset about spirituality and walking with God that is rooted somewhere deep in the heart of John Wayne. All right, pilgrims, it's me. It's not a very good imitation, by the way, either. And God... and I'm going to do it all by myself, you see. That was a little bit better. I want you to know that every New Testament command that I can find is in what's called grammatically the second person plural. Hey, be this kind of a husband, you all men. Be this kind of a wife. Walk in purity, you all. Second person plural means you can't do it alone. It's not hard. It is impossible to be a man of God, a woman of God, the kind of husband, the kind of pure single person, the kind of employer, employee, church member, elder, deacon. It's impossible to do what God's called you to do. You, God, your Bible. You need people. I need people. But not people that are at a length, not people that know you superficially, not people that you let in on just certain things and the real deep struggles and the secrets and the difficulty and the pain and the hurts never get out on the table. You were never designed. It is impossible for you and impossible for me to make it apart from other people. We all agree. I mean, at this point, I love your faces. You're telling me, I agree with that. Intellectually, everyone agrees with biblical accountability. I mean, back to, you are your brother's keeper. Our experience affirms it works. Some of you will look back and you could say, you know what, I would not be the person I am today apart. And you're either thinking of a real close friendship, a mentor, a small group, a season at times that it was just like, wow. Man, there was connection, open, honesty. You were motivated. History affirms. I mean, we've got the Moravians, the Wesleys, the Korean movement, the small group movement. I mean, they didn't call them Methodists for nothing. It was their methodology. You were in a small group. You shared. In Methodism, people would meet twice a week, and they would have corporate confession. This is where I sinned this week. We had to reintroduce that, see how it works. The Moravians did something very similar. If you see the mushrooming of the church in Korea, built around the small group movement of holistic small groups, really ministering to one another. In fact, the world has learned it. They know that overcoming certain things, if you go to AA, right? If you go to Al-Anon, if you go to Celebrate Recovery, if you go to Weight Watchers, if you go to Jenny Craig, I mean, what has the world learned? People don't make lasting change unless they are together with other people, loving, encouraging, and holding one another accountable. And yet, the great majority of all the Christians do not have or experience biblical accountability. I mean, what do they do in group counseling, rehab centers? Isn't it? Have you ever been around someone who's been through a 12-step program? Unbelievable. I mean, the level of honesty, I'll never forget this. Power of accountability. We started a Celebrate Recovery program. Santa Cruz is where I pastored for about 12 and a half years. I mean, if you had an addiction, we had you in our church. I mean, it's a wild, crazy, crazy place. And so we started this, and this guy I never met came up afterwards, and he had a notebook in his hands. He says, "Excuse me." I said, "Hi." He said, "Could I do my fourth step with you?" And I said, "I don't know what the fourth step is." He said, "Well, I go to the Celebrate Recovery here, and it was on Friday nights, and a whole group of people that, they hadn't made it quite to church yet, and they were making a lot of progress, and, they're doing worship, and God was working, and I thought, I should know more about this." So I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, it'll take 2 hours." I said, "Well, why don't you get with my assistant, we'll figure it out." So we blocked off from 2 to 4, and later that week he came in over and sat down. He goes, no, like, "Hey, how you doing? Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Exactly what is the fourth step?" It says it's a total moral inventory where I go back through my life and try and discern, and I've asked, it's not the higher power here. We believe Jesus is the higher power. He is my God. And I've asked God to reveal to me anything I've ever done to hurt anyone at any time, and I want to own the responsibility for what I've done and stop blaming anything or anyone, including God. And you got to get specific. I said, "Okay." And he had, a yellow pad, all handwritten. He goes, "When I was 7 years old," he started, "when I was 11 years old." And I mean, he told me stuff I'm thinking, I would not, and I'm thinking, here, I'm a pastor of a church. I have staff meetings where we talk about vulnerability. And I'm thinking, I think we're doing like a C- in terms of honesty and vulnerability compared to this guy. And that's why those secrets get out and strongholds are broken. We need one another. Well, if we agree we need one another so much, we know it works. Question: why don't more believers have authentic biblical accountability that allows you to sustain the discipline and the arenas that God is revealing to you that you want and you long for Him to change in you? And I would like to give you 5 reasons why accountability is essential for spiritual success. And what you're going to find is we're going to start right where we were in the last passage. I'm going to make the case that the Apostle Paul, one of the greatest Christians, if not the greatest Christian of all time, is going to say, here's my greatest desire and here's my greatest fear. And his greatest fear is that he would blow it. And then he's going to teach us through 1 Corinthians chapter 10 the necessity and the reasons for biblical accountability. And then at the very end, I'm going to say, okay, have you ever had someone say, I think they're trying to sell me. I think they're trying to persuade me right now, but I'm not sure. I want you to know, I am. Okay, no holes barred. I'm going to try and convince you from Scripture and I pray the Spirit's energizing power in His Word. When I get done in about 20 minutes going through these passages, I hope you'll go, I got to have biblical accountability. Whatever it takes, I got to have it. And then I'm going to give you just a little game plan, some practical ways to get it operational, and then the ball's in your court. All right? Here we go. 5 reasons biblical accountability is essential for spiritual success. Number 1, because we never outgrow the need for personal accountability. We never outgrow the need for personal accountability. And you say, Chip, well, where do you get that? Well, let's listen one more time to what the Apostle Paul said. He says, verse 24 of chapter 9 of 1 Corinthians, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you win. And everyone who competes in the games, those Olympic games, exercises discipline or self-control in all things. Well, they do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we do it in imperishable. Therefore, application, I run in such a way, not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air, clear-cut goal. I buffet my body, and I make it my slave, discipline, lest possibly after I preach to others, I myself should be disqualified. Paul's greatest desire, great use for Christ. Paul's greatest fear, I think I might myself get disqualified. I'll get off track. Here's the principle. If Paul had those concerns, how much more should we? I'm thinking to myself, can you imagine, if it was possible, can you just imagine, what if the Apostle Paul just showed up in the flesh? And he said, Paul, want to grab a cup of coffee between sessions? And I can just hear him. Yeah, Chip, let's get some coffee. And can you imagine sitting down across from him? It would never enter my mind that this guy down deep in his heart is concerned that someday, some way, through subtle deception, he might no longer be God's man and walk with him. But that's what he's telling us right here. Leaders are among the most susceptible. And by the way, the more responsibility one gets, the more accountability that you need. Leaders have more time alone than others. The more you lead, and by the way, it can be in your family, it can be in your church, it can be in your company. People start assuming you've been in the Lord a long time. People go for you for wisdom and this and that. No one asks you the hard questions anymore. In fact, it would be embarrassing to ask some of you people the hard questions because, you're so mature, you're so godly. You would never have those thoughts, right? Wrong. And so we never outgrow the need for personal accountability. And the greater the responsibility you have, either spiritually, family-wise. And by the way, when I say leaders, ladies, don't click into that. Some of you, I do most of my leading at home. Is that not like the most important leadership role? Isn't that all future generations? So, I need this, you need this. There's great pressure as you lead, and therefore great opportunity for compromise. So the first reason is you never outgrow it. The second reason that we need biblical accountability for spiritual success is because past successes are no guarantee of future faithfulness. Past successes. And this is very subtle. I've been walking with God for years. I read my Bible. I pray. And I go to church. My family's done this. And, you know what? I'm a man or, I have a few little struggles here and there, but I'm not having big problems with the internet. Hey, lighten up, guy. I'm okay. Past successes are no guarantee of future faithfulness. And you say, well, where do you get that? I get it from what Paul said. After Paul just finishing telling me, I'm afraid I might blow it, he reaches back into the Old Testament. And he's going to go back and look at, let's take a look at the Israelites. And let's get some lessons from them about people that had some pretty cool experiences. That's some past success. How'd you like to be on the I went through the Red Sea team and got a t-shirt at the end? Hey! I was there. Or I was on the manna team 40 years. You know, a little picture over here, you know, a little logo that says, you know, I ate special kind of bread for 40 years and never. Or how about I was on I watched Corey get swallowed up, you know, on team, you know? Remember that part? Or maybe the group that has a little insignia of a snake. Remember when those people were grumbling and the serpents oh yes, I was on the fire by night and the Shekinah glory by day team. Do you realize how many amazing, overwhelming, supernatural experiences the children of Israel had? I want to tell you something, but write this down. Your spiritual experiences will not sustain you. God's works will not sustain you. You will forgive them. Only His ways will sustain you. And this is in the notes, but jot down Psalm 103:7. After that great introduction about not forgetting and blessing the Lord, there's almost a weird verse because, where does this fit? It's the hinge of that psalm. And after he talks about remembering all of God's works, His works, His works, His works, His works, and then after verse 7, it's all about His character, His faithfulness, His love, as far as the east is from the west, you know, all that. There's this funny verse. He made known His ways to Moses, His acts to the sons of Israel. God's acts. You know, He healed your boy of cancer. They came through the car wreck. You didn't go into bankruptcy. I mean, these amazing acts, we could pile them up. God's done so many things, and yet 2 months later, 2 years later, you have a crisis. What happens? Oh, God, where are you? That's no different than the Red Sea and the manna and the serpents and all the rest. It's His ways that sustain you. That's why Moses wasn't saying, God, give me one more great experience. He said, Lord, I want to see your glory. I want to know you. I want to know what you're like. I want to know your heart. So he reaches back in the Old Testament, and notice the connecting word for. He's giving a reason. He says that I should be disqualified. Because Paul's looking back and saying, if those people with those amazing experiences can get disqualified, who am I? He says, for I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud. They all passed through the sea. And they were all baptized into Moses in the cloud and the sea. And they all ate the same spiritual food, the manna, and they drank the same spiritual drink. For they were drinking from a spiritual rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ. Underline the next word. Nevertheless. Nevertheless. With most of them, God was not well pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness. Walking with God in the past is no guarantee that you'll walk with Him in the future. Yesterday's experiences do not make you useful for tomorrow. There's no such thing as spiritual autopilot. We now have, we're at 30,000 feet. If you can lean back, put up your sleigh tray, boop, you will walk with God until you die. Wrong. You're either growing or shrinking spiritually. For all of us. I could pass a microphone around about now, and you could tell me stories. I've got mine, but I don't need to share. You could tell me stories of some of your great heroes. A pastor, a mentor, a church leader. That, somewhere in your spiritual journey, they were like, whoa, hey, someday, some way, I want to be. And right now, they're a moral failure, right? We all have at least one, I've got more than a few, of people that I will tell you far more gifted than me, love God far more than me, who are not only not in the ministry, but they're not married to the same person or involved in horrendous things. There's people that have led thousands of people to Christ and had amazing impact, who somewhere along the line thought there was a new set of rules for them. Doesn't really apply to me. I'm under a lot of pressure. I have a little more freedom than other people. And, boy, it's sad.
You know, we talked about something that is the key to discipline. You know, it's biblical accountability. When you have someone holding you accountable, and we mean biblical, you invite someone into your life to help you keep your commitments to God. And by the way, it's not just spiritual issues. You know, I think of accountability I've had with a personal trainer. I think of coaches that have got me to do things that I never thought I could do. We always function best when there's people around our lives that force us. You know, it's what we want, but we just can't do it on our own. When have you had an experience with an accountability partner in some way that was positive? I mean, it doesn't have to be spiritual, but I want you to get the concept. I want you to begin to grasp there's certain things in your life, and especially your life with God, that you'll never make it on your own. That's the part of this whole teaching. Accountability is we need one another. But it's not just this light little social, how you doing? It's where we get to the real stuff of life.